Hello, I'm Quinn Calderon. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to share with you my research project and results. I found it really interesting, had some amazing interviews, and I hope you enjoy it. So the topic that I chose, diversity in sports, understanding the experience of minority student athletes within tennis. Um, as most of you guys probably know, tennis is considered a country club sport and very associated with white athletes, um, usually typically with higher income levels. So the purpose of this study was to understand the experience of minority student athletes participating within collegiate tennis programs. And the paper sought out to understand why collegiate tennis has experienced an under-depreciation of minority student athletes, particularly blacks. So if you look at the overall participation of black athletes within the NCAA, you're looking at about 43%. If you look at particularly male black tennis athletes, only out of all the NCAA, only 4% of them make up collegiate tennis players. So it's a significant difference. So the central research questions this study examined are as follows. Okay. What role did the family play in the student athlete's decision to participate in tennis? What programs or coaches were most influential in the student athlete's decision to play tennis? And what are the student athletes' overall perception and experience of race in tennis? Uh, we did 15 article reviews. Couldn't fit all of them in here, so we did, or I picked some ones with some different opinions and that I thought were significant to the paper. So the first one by George Cunningham, titled "Creating and Sustaining Employees in College Athletic Workplaces: Culture Supportive of LGBT Employees in Collegiate College Athletics." So written up in the Journal of Sports Management. And the goal of the study was to understand how participants conceptualize LGBT inclusiveness in their sports department. Um, 17 coaches and administrators had individual interviews with the author. This was with two competitive Division III programs. Um, it was a structured interview with all participants, and the results show that the work environment and the recruitment environment of collegiate sports athletics is very positive towards the LGBT community. Um, I think we are going the right direction. I know it's a battle, but basically this is important for the paper to shed light on an institutional and cultural based negativity that racial minorities might face. And we are going, like I said, we are going in the right direction. And this study showed that it was a very positive experience. They are Division III programs. But, like I said, I think we are going in the right direction. Uh, the second article, titled "Prevalence of Clinical Evaluated Depressive Syndrome in College Athletics and Differences by Gender and Sport," have a handful of authors here. The object of the paper was to describe the prevalence of depression syndrome among NCAA Division I student athletes. And so the study started off 3 years, 722 student athletes were evaluated. The sample was then cut to 465 student athletes. 43.1% of them male, and 56.9% of them female. The research basically concluded that the level of depression among student athletes is similar to the general collegiate population. This is really important to understand, for my paper, to understand what the mental state of a student athlete might be and how it potentially differs or is similar to the general population. There was one more study done where we talk that is in my research paper, and that looked at minorities and their mental health. They did find that minority female student athletes were more likely to have depression syndromes over minority male athletes, and the whole paper really just concluded that it really came down to social support, and they found that minorities tended to have a lower social or a smaller social support network. It's really important to understand, just as a college as a whole. I know they are getting better, but it's really important and I think colleges are starting to do a great job of creating a social network, getting rid of stigmas about depression and what it comes along with it. And there are support groups and creating that supportive family at the college level. The last one we're going to highlight here is an article by Yapark and Unlu, and it's probably the most influential article review that I conducted. It was aimed to investigate the relationship between the financial ability of parents and the decision of student athletes in college to pursue certain sports. So the study attempted to understand whether upper class or middle class individuals were more likely to play country club sports such as tennis and golf and so on. So the parents of the student athletes that were competing were given the questionnaire. So there was 212 participants, and all the participants were parents of the student athletes. After the questionnaires were analyzed, they did find out that parents who associated themselves as a lower class household tended to participate in soccer, volleyball, football, whereas if somebody identified themselves as middle class or upper class, were much more likely to actually play tennis and basketball. So it's just really important for the researcher to understand that, or during this research, that a social economic factor may play a part, whereas there is many other factors. But it basically, this study raised the question of whether or not most tennis players at the collegiate level or college level are middle class to upper class, and what percentage would consider themselves lower economical status, or at least their parents. All right, so getting into my research, used a mixed methodology design was chosen. I had a telephone interview as I didn't have direct access to all the student athletes, and it was a lot of open-ended questions with some general questions such as like age, race, what year they are in school, where they play, what level. So originally an IRB form was completed, submitted, and approved by a faculty advisor. I ended up working with 7 student athletes that all participate at collegiate tennis levels. Some from junior college all the way up to Pac-12 Division One. Um, excuse me. Ended up doing that through a snowball method. I knew many of them, but not all of them, and ended up just kind of talking to some coaches and other players, and ended up with 7. The head coach of each institution was then informed and asked if it was okay to speak to the student athlete. All of them responded really positively, as they all pretty much know me. None of the participants were minors, so no consent forms were filled and filled out by their parents or guardians. Um, the results, like I said, some great and amazing interviews, but the results basically that all participants were asked in what form they perceived their family support from them, and all 7 participants admitted that their family assisted in one way or another. 6 of the participants had financial support as well as moral support, and their parents encouraged them to play tennis. It was pretty much their choice, the parents' choice to start the kids off in tennis. And one of them only had moral support, but their parents were very encouraging of them to play tennis. So I think that was the number one reason why all these participants did lean towards tennis itself. One of the staggering similarities that came out of the interviews is that all 7 participants um, basically expressed the financial burden um, that's synonymous with playing tennis. Unfortunately, most, as they stated, most black households were not as wealthy as their white counterparts. So the following statement was basically a qualitative statement that all the participants had. Um, the views of um, race on tennis vary greatly. One of the other research papers that we studied was Douglas in 2005. He interviewed Venus and Serena Williams, and there is still definitely racism within the WTA, or the Women's Professional Tour. And the interview was very interesting by Serena and Venus Williams, explaining some of the things that they've had to overcome. So, however, it was very interesting to note that all the participants at one point talked about either Arthur Ashe or Serena or Venus Williams as symbols of overcoming racism, and all the participants admitted that tennis is a predominantly white sport. All participants, when we talked to them about their that third question, the experience of racism within tennis, with them, um, none of them experienced actually racism within, I guess, their white counterparts, or at tournaments, but they all felt the pressure. They all felt like it was there, and they had more peer pressure from other black student athletes on why they're not playing basketball or football or baseball, and why are they playing? Many of the participants stated, why are they playing a white man's sport? So I found that was very interesting, as they had to deal with more peer pressure at their own schools. So the results of the whole research show that each of the participants had multiple mentors. It's evident, though, without all these mentors, they're not going to play tennis, but their main push to play tennis was from their family. Um, So discussion. The study had similar findings by Park and Yunlu. The statement by the participants clearly show that participants felt that tennis is a sport associated with rich white folk. Um, that's actually a quote from a few of the participants. So 100% of our participants benefited from receiving support from their parents. Um, Only one of the student athletes did not receive, so 14% didn't receive any financial support. He only had moral support, whereas the other 85% of them received both financial and moral support. All participants felt that the moral support was more important than the financial support. Um, when growing up trying to be a black tennis player. Um, the majority of the participants, 72%, had parents who played tennis either at a high school level or at a collegiate level, and only 14% of the parents played another sport within tennis at the college level. So most of the families are considered tennis or would consider themselves tennis families. So recommendations, implications, and future research. The finding of the study are consistent with the finding of Burham and Bruce. The author suggests that more research ought to be conducted to understand the impact of family relationships on the impact of leadership. So family is really where it starts. So the study proves that coaches and tennis programs don't have really any effect on their decision by the child to choose tennis itself. It's all pretty much from the parents. So given a second opportunity, the study would include 2 additional research questions. It would ask what the USTA should consider in deciding whether to fund a minority sports program, and if the student athletes think that free tennis lessons for children in black neighborhoods would likely increase the number of black children playing tennis, or if perception would discourage children from playing the sport. So USTA is United States Tennis Association. They have endless dollars. Almost all the participants did participate when they very first started in some sort of tennis program, not necessarily through the USTA. Almost all of them exclusively not in the USTA, and they're the biggest organization, and should they put something together? So here are the some references. We spoke about some of the article reviews earlier, so most of them relate to either minorities in depression, social economical classes, and what sports or what kind of culture is being provided at the collegiate level. Okay, and the last thing, I do want to thank a few people. The paper wouldn't have been possible without the support of my best friends, my wife Linda. She's been amazing through this whole thing, as you guys all know. It's quite a bit of work. I also want to thank my 7 participants for trusting me with a very intimate relationship about their lives and believing in the project. Some of the interviews were just amazing, and their stories, and it was really awesome, and everybody seemed to really open up and be willing to share. And finally, I want to thank Angela. Her patience and professionalism and dedication to us as a class has been amazing. I really don't know if I could have got through the whole project without her. So Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.